Robert, how would you describe what's ahead of us?
Just the beautiful Santa Barbara ocean beach on an overcast day. Like we got back from the hot springs in Montecito, and it was pretty sunny up there. And now like the overcast along the coast is coming in, and it's kind of it's kind of there's something ethereal about this.
As I hold the microphone for Robert, I'm shaking because I haven't properly dried myself. Matt is also cold. So Robert, what have you been reading about regarding religion lately?
Okay, so I haven't been reading about religion. I am reading Matt Pegasus' book, The Black Album. That's just a collection of short stories, and if you want to say that's about religion, some of it is about like occultism, and I'm probably gonna interview him about that, so I won't get into that too much. But it's definitely an interesting book, and it's worth checking out. As far as reading about, I'm not really reading about religion that much. I mean, to be honest, I don't want to sound too much like a Philistine, but because I'm sort of ADHD and I have kind of a short attention span, like I'm not reading that extensively. But I will say is like I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about these topics. Like for a while, I was watching a lot of Colin Wilson, then Neoplatonism, and then some videos about like near-death experiences.
I see. And Colin Wilson, he wrote The Outsiders, and he didn't go to school, right? But he was like an occultist.
Right. His main area of expertise was he was a really prolific author. He wrote a lot of fiction too, but his main interest was on the study of consciousness.
I see. Do you have any like odd stories maybe about his occult like practices, perhaps, or anything that you may know that maybe he did like a cool ritual or something?
I don't know of him really being into like rituals, that kind of a cult, but I do notice he's wrote extensive. His main thing was consciousness, so he would talk about like the peak experience and like doing things to get intensity. So I guess I know some story where his daughter went missing out in public, and then the moment he found her again, he had this intense feeling of joy. Like that's more what I associate him with. Not really, even though he did write a book about the occult. I think he really gets into Crowley, but I associate more with more kind of like with consciousness and seeking out the peak experience, and how like we become like the robot because we go for like the day-to-day kind of rituals like work and being online, and just the need to seek out that peak experience, or like kind of how you get like nostalgia, and a certain scent reminds you of the past, and that creates this intense sense of nostalgia. I mean, that is really the essence of Wilson.
Yeah, I have a question, Robert. So what extent do you view your long-standing project, The Stark Truth, your podcast, now a Substack, to what extent do you kind of, I mean, maybe you've already answered it, but you have an affinity for Wilson. You kind of are also this outsider type who's created a body of work on a wide variety of topics. Do you see yourself as kind of a modern take on Colin Wilson? Not to make you say something to flatter your own ego, but I view your work that way, so I was curious. And it's not that you were inspired by him; it's more that you found later he's a kindred spirit, right?
And quick interjection: you guys have known each other for a long ass time.
Since 2018, yeah.
That's really long.
Almost. Let's see. That's almost 6 years. That's sort of long.
6 years.
Yeah.
I've known about you for over 6 years, and we met. It'll be 6 years to the day on July 1st of this year. Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Back to the original question.
Which question about whether I'm a modern day Colin Wilson?
Yeah. Just comment on the similarities between you and Colin.
Sure,
Wilson.
why not? I don't really have much to add to that. If you want to flatter me, like go ahead.
Yes, I view your work in that.
Okay.
Vein. I view my own work in that vein too. I'll add. But.
Next question.
Yes. So regarding we were talking about what you've been reading, regarding religion. In your day-to-day life, what is it like for you to do research? Do you like wake up and you're like, I'm gonna look at Twitter and then kind of see what's going on while I was sleeping, or what's your daily diet like?
Sure, I do. I mean, since I'm prolific on Substack, I'm constantly researching various topics. If it's specific to mysticism, sure, but it's not really like a daily routine. It's more like if I have an article and it's specific to the article, I do extensive research for the articles.
Cool. Do ideas just come to you like you're sitting there, then all of a sudden you write it down?
Okay, so combination of both. Sometimes brilliant ideas just come to me. Sometimes it's a process of research, and then sometimes I just get the spark. So it's a combination of both.
That's freaking cool. Do you accredit so regarding like spiritual practices? Do you accredit this ability from meditating that you maybe do sometimes, or like doing candle magic or anything like that?
I mean, I meditate, but I can't say that, like, I haven't gotten to the point, like, it makes me more relaxed, but to a degree, like, have I found something more profound? Meditating, like, maybe a while back, I would meditate on cannabis, and I would get interesting visuals would come to me, and then I would use that to write a visual scene for one of my novels, so stuff like that. But not really. I mean, a lot of the most insightful, or you could say mystical incidences that have come to me have been more spontaneous.
That's cool, because I've seen some of your art, and it actually looks like, at least the one I saw in Matt's house, it actually looks like it could have even be in Vaporfornia. Your fiction books that you've written.
I remember Matt wrote that, how his intro to the book, Vaporfornia, says, I'm an artist with words just as much as I am with paint. And I think, it is, Vaporfornia is a very visual novel, so there are these graphic, like, aesthetic and descriptions of every location that the character or protagonist is visiting.
Cool.
It is also surreal as well.
That's cool.
People say it's like a fever dream.
So was your first introduction to the concept of vaporwave, was it Macintosh Plus?
Not really, I just like when the meme really took off, like I like the aesthetic.
Cool.
And then also the hidden meaning, like vaporware is like a concept, like something that's put forth that doesn't exist, so it's like I play in a metaphor, so it relates to like saudade, like nostalgia for what could have been.
Do you think that kind of relates to like Mark Fisher's capitalist realism, in that it's kind of you're kind of getting nostalgia, that it's just like a repeating nostalgia brought about by capitalism or something?
Like nostalgia of a ontology, yeah.
I see. All right.
What is it you says? It's nostalgia of nostalgia. Nostalgia of capitalism and consumerism from the past, and you're trying to seek like deeper meaning from it.
Yeah, I think that's what Mark said. Fucking Matt's doing yoga right now. No, it's good. We like it. All right, moving on. So theosophy. What do you think of it? Do you think it's the truth? Do you think it's like the most level-headed centrist take on religion? Do you think Americans should maybe be more theosophical?
Yeah, I think it is. Like, the best argument you can make for theosophy is by analyzing near-death experiences. So the first point is because the medical and scientific evidence is strong enough for their legitimacy. So, for instance, the people are clinically dead. Their brains are clinically dead, so so it's not really a hallucination. And I don't think also hallucinations tend to be more hypnagogic. People with NDEs report that all their senses and sights are very vivid and intense, so it's not like it's very different feeling than a hallucination. And then also, they often have these out-of-body experiences where they'll report on something that actually happened while they were out. So there is very strong, legitimate scientific evidence for that. And then you take the next step. The next step is that the themes in your death experiences are pluralistic, so they match many different faiths. And some might be very Christian in themes, but some are very universalistic. But I would say that like theosophy as well as Neoplatonism are very much intuitive rather than dogmatic religions. So they make the most sense by studying like nature, biology, and psychology.
So one might call this prol drift, that I'm drifting to proletarians right now, but could you define what Neoplatonism is and how that relates to what you just are talking about?
I can't give you like a full-blown lecture on what Neoplatonism is, but it was a religion created by, or you could say a philosophy or religious philosophy created by Plotinus he was a Greek from Alexandria who was living in Rome, and he created this religious school of thought in about 300 AD, in the same period that like you had the Gnostics and the early Christians were rising up.
Cool. And I like to
It
note.
is based on Plato, right? Or is that a little bit of a?
There's debate
maybe
about
less so
that.
than it would sound. Yeah.
It's a lot
little
of
bit based on
like
Plato, but
supposedly
not as much,
Plato
yeah.
had these like lost religious scripts that are gone.
Yeah.
I like to point out regarding the scenery. I'm watching a children's like castle they built on the sand. It's being eroded away by the ocean. It's kind of sad, but it's also very beautiful at the same time. Anyway, do you have any psychic abilities?
So nothing like telekinesis, but I have had like mystical experiences, or like I might find a very strong spiritual reaction to aesthetics or to certain locations, or like especially how certain sights and scents help me rediscover lost memories. So you could say saudade or like lost dreams, but it's more like certain visuals or certain places give me like a really intense like psychological or ethereal experience.
So you don't think I've ever read someone's mind on accident before, or something like that?
Let me think.
Or someone's ever pinged you on the astral plane, and you like maybe you thought you were thinking about them, and then they contacted you right then, or something like that?
Well, I've had like dreams while I'm asleep and other people in the house are still awake, and I hear their conversations. But I'm kind of hesitant to count that.
I see. Cool. Matt, you asked something. Matt was just practicing the LBRP on the beach. Kind of cringe, but it was also cool.
It wasn't the LVRP. I picked up a staff and made a pentacle. That's all.
Oh, sick. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call you cringe.
No, it's okay.
Here you go. Can you tell me about the time that you were meditating and your camera almost got stolen?
Okay, so
This
was June Lake, the paranormal experience at June Lake, or say mystical experience. So I was out swimming in June Lake, and
for people who don't know, it's north of Mammoth and here in California. It's an alpine lake.
so I just had this intense light coming in from the mountain. Like it felt like pure love. Like it basically was like God, and very similar to what people report with near-death experiences. And
I don't ask this to question the experience. Had you just taken a benzo, or were you sober?
yeah, I had a few benzo or two. But anyhow, like Matt was there meditating while I was having the real authentic mystical experience. Like just you feel like this intense feeling of like pure love, and then he's there, and then like my camera is someone's stealing my camera, and I'm yelling Matt, and he's there meditating, totally ignoring me. And I tell the guy,
Christ, what does he want?
and it was like there was some young sort of like mentally challenged guy. I think he was Samoan, and he picks up my bag, and I don't know if he was mistaken it or he was trying to. I have no idea if he was trying to steal from me or he mistake it for something of his family's. But eventually, I got him to hand it back to me. But Matt was still there meditating the whole time. But anyhow, I want to talk about. I think like you got the experience itself and how to interpret it. Like you have to kind of accept these things like they're just like gifts from the divine. I don't want to analyze it, be too analytical, but it really relates to like the Neoplatonist perspective. Like beauty is emanation from the divine, and it's a total rejection from the Gnostic view that totally rejects the physical world. So like it reminds me, there's this meme of this beautiful like mountain lake, and like and it says Gnostics think this is evil, and I mean that's pretty ridiculous. But it was like you can take like a non-religious interpretation that like a scientific non-secular interpretation just says like beauty or being in nature will stimulate a spiritual response, and I don't want to go there. Like I think there is something authentic, spiritual about what happened, and again I would say it was like a gift from the divine. But it was just like I was in the lake and I saw a mountain on the other side of June Lake, and then this light pouring in from the sun, and it just felt like the essence of God, basically.
That's beautiful. Here's an interesting question. Can ugly things be divine, even if it's like violent or ugly? Are only beautiful things divine, or can ugly be beautiful just because it's a? Yeah. What do you think?
That's open to interpretation. I don't know if like beauty is the best word, but there's dualism. I believe there's like dualism. So something to the grotesque, like you could find meaning. You could find meaning in it, or sometimes you see, like you might meet a person and they have these dual characteristics, like they have a beautiful side and an ugly side. It could be like the personality, like they have a good personality but they're ugly, and vice versa. But sometimes like you get this weird mixed feelings about their aesthetic, physical attraction, and also like you go to like you might go to a certain place, and it's kind of like how people find like a romanticism and like the grittiness in certain like urban areas. Like it kind of relates back to that theme of like hauntology, or even like with like malls, how malls used to be considered really like tacky and like epitomized crass commercialism, but now people are rediscovering beauty.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I mean, I think you actually can, and it's like that question: is beauty an absolute, or is it subjective or objective? And I'd say it's a bit of, there's dualism, so it's a bit of both. There are both subjective and objective aspects to it. There are absolutes to beauty, but there is some like room for nuance at the same time.
Yeah. If I could take a stab, I think you really do need ugliness and violence and hideousness and chaos in order for there to be beauty and order in a meaningful sense. So I think that in that sense, there's different definitions of beauty. You have beauty as an absolute, eternal, Platonic form beauty that obviously that is kind of in opposition to ugliness, but ultimately in a broader sense, you need both beauty and ugliness, and therefore the ugliness itself is also beautiful. Is kind of where I come at it from. We're talking about Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, all these buzzwords. I don't know where I position myself exactly with regard to them, but within Gnosticism,
Gnostics actually so Neoplatonists believe like this world is like a photocopy of the divine, so there's emanation. Gnostics actually literally believe that this world is evil and ruled by this I forget the name, Demiurge, this evil deity who oppresses us, and the only way to seek like beauty, justice, and goodness is to basically spiritually, like maybe through meditation, but to escape from this world.
Right.
So the Gnostics truly reject everything about this world. They actually don't find beauty in it, which I think I think that's insane, actually.
No, I do too. That's Gnostics in the most traditional heretical Christian sense. I do think modern Gnostics like Stephen Heller and others in Los Angeles, I think they have a more nuanced Jungian take on it. I don't know exactly where he stands on the world being evil or not. I do recognize that's the main gist of Gnosticism, but I think there can be shades that may overlap with Neoplatonism. I don't want to necessarily take a firm stance one way or the other, but only to say that Gnosticism, as I've studied it, through Heller and others, involves belief in both Abraxas and the Godhead, as it were, and that you can have both a chaotic God and something more transcendent. I don't think I'm going to say anything very insightful here, other than on the matter of beauty and ugliness, you do need both. And we should go to the restaurant in a moment, but to finish the thought, I'll just say this. Your June Lake mystical experience I was there for, when you first told me about it, Robert, I'll be honest, like, you've said things like that in the past in terms of, like, experiencing some kind of transcendence, and I haven't always taken it seriously, but I'll admit maybe I was wrong to have sort of brushed it off, because it seems like that particular experience has really stayed with you. And I do respect that, and I do think the divine can be experienced in any number of ways, and whether there is something objective or solely subjective going on is almost beside the point, and it seems like that experience was really authentic.
Here's an interesting question. Robert, may I ask how old you are?
38.
So on the topic of Gnosticism, Carl Jung, he has a quote that says life doesn't actually begin until you're 40. You're older than Matt and I. Do you think that's true as you come closer to that?
I mean, a lot of people online are going to say that's a cope, but I do think like the spiritual essence, maybe like people become more spiritual at a certain age. That could be like your mind. I think like mentally, like more. I'm like the most productive I've ever been, because in in my 20s, I had the too much too much. Well, I guess you could say like
hang-ups, emotional.
Well,
I don't want to put
my mind too like more ADHD kind of, where I was like scattered, and maybe I was could be a slacker, or I just had too much chaotic energy and I couldn't think straight. And I think right now, like, I'm still relatively young, but I feel like I'm mentally and overall like I'm the most productive I've ever been.
Yeah, I mean, even in my late 20s versus early 20s, and that Evan, that structure you're talking about just got totally obliterated. Or they're still working on it, but the tide is coming in here.
Zeus is taking care of it.
Zeus is taking care of it. The moon's bringing the water in. But yeah, Robert, I resonate with what you're saying. And even compared to my earlier 20s, I feel like my later 20s have been a time of greater focus. I've been talking about this a lot. And something's lost, because that ADHD, maybe that's part and parcel of the fire of youth. It's the fire of youth not finding its, mate, as it were. It's the fire of youth. It's hard to put the fire of youth to productive ends. It can be the most beautiful thing when you do, but it gets easier as you're older, as that fire calms down to channel it, and I've experienced that too.
My bad, I meant Poseidon.
Poseidon, yeah.
I think we should go to the restaurant too, but here's a good question. When was the first podcast that you guys recorded together?
That would
just
be
got reposted on my Twitter.
Yeah, that was in 2018.
June of 2018. Or you didn't post it till July, perhaps. But yeah, it was a big deal to me. I was young. I was 20.
And Matt, I think Matt
23?
discovered me because of the Shoo Shoo interview. Matt was a big fan of the band Shoo Shoo.
Correct. Your interview with Pill Eater with Jamie Stewart of Shoo Shoo, discovered January 2018, and I was trying to get your attention, but you were in Europe, and I finally got you to respond to my message in like May, and I was over the moon that I got to record a podcast with you.
Shout out Matt was like starstruck when he first met me.
Yeah, Matt, you were starstruck. What was it like meeting Robert?
Oh, fantastic. He's exactly as you'd expect him to be.
Got it. Robert, talking about Shoo Shoo, what's a good...
Shoo Shoo, Evan?
Yeah, XYU?
Yeah. I think we should...
Anyway, wait, one last question. What's a good band, Robert?
What's a good band?
Do you have a favorite band? Like mine, I think my favorite's the Beatles.
I don't think I have a favorite band. What have I been listening to?
Yeah, just a band, something, a vibe. Yeah.
This is... I don't know if I say my favorite band or even favorite song, but the song 9 a.m. until... What's it called? Until 9 a.m., the like kind of Euro synth dance song or rave song. I wouldn't say it's like the best song ever or my favorite band or song by I think it's called... Well, I don't even know the band's name. ABC? No, that's not right. But until... Okay, I think it's 9 a.m. until I come. That's what it's called. And I heard it out of all people, Rabbi Shmuley Botiak doing some crazy dancing at a Purim party. And I said, what's the name of this song? And someone said the name. And it wasn't... I mean, I like the song, but it's not the best song ever. But I was just so, like, relieved because I remember that song from, like, my adolescence, like, around the year 2000.
Also,
and it was like...
Bat Mitzvah, right? So it's...
right? Well... Yeah, like, the whole... like... Have you some like inside connection like that inspired like part of my the Natalie Bloom character in Vaporfornia, Virgin of Journey to Vapor Island. But anyhow, like I was like, I was just saying like now I found out the song after waiting like over 2 decades, like. Dun, 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 dun.
We'll play the song in the car, and I'll actually probably... I've been throwing caution to the wind about getting a seat. I'll just put music in my podcast these days. We'll put it on.
Yeah, okay, we're going to go to the restaurant. I'm going to skip a rock, and we're going to go. So here, I'm just going to grab this rock real quick. If I can find one. All right. We've arrived to the Himalayan restaurant, and we're sitting in the car outside of the place because we want to talk about something we can't talk about in public. Robert, you've written some essays about the politics of sex. One of them being oral sex is hierarchical and Malthusian under liberalism, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the other angle of sex is more the Colin Wilson angle, but sex is very much an exploration of consciousness. It's about the physical and about the consciousness. That's the other angle, but it's very true. The role that oral sex plays under modern society.
Sure. I want to break it down for the proles real quick. So if a woman performs oral sex on you, so it matters like your class or something?
Yeah, because I mean it's hierarchical. So like what does it mean? Like it's kind of a weird like leftist like inversion. So like if like a rich white person performs oral sex on like a poor black person, it's kind of like a leftist inversion of like traditional like social hierarchies.
Right, because it really quote unquote should be like a wealthy white woman giving oral sex to a wealthy white man, or a poor white woman giving oral.
What about a black incel going down on like a rich white Stacy, like something like that? So that is like, what's the politics of that? And no, that's an interesting political discourse to say. Or an incel, like what about an incel going down on like a high status like Stacy, or it could be a Chad, who knows?
So that's like the inversion kind of what we just said in that, like that would be
it's hierarchical, but the incel is getting access that they're not usually getting access to.
And that would never happen in real life anyway.
I mean, it's not realistic, but it puts forth a pretty, I'd say it's not just about sex, but it puts forth like a new social paradigm. I don't know, I might call it radical centrism, but that comes across as super autistic. But I think it's political. It is politically radical, and it takes apart social it tears down like existing like social hierarchies, and then rebuilds them to create like a new social like structure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I understand that one. And I think I agree with it too.
It's a metaphor for like a new political order.
Matt had something to say about that.
All I was going to say during that discourse was strange flows, folks, asking the questions that matter.
Yeah, we're not afraid because we're trying to get to the bottom of this shit.
Yeah.
That's the oral sex essay.
I guess the one question is, so should the partner, I guess the egalitarian way is like sexual egalitarianism is having like a looks matched like sexual a looks matched couple who either have like missionary position or they have oral sex, and it's like totally reciprocal.
That's the ideal.
But that's like the egalitarian ideal. But if you have like a big disparity, where you have like a relationship based on total unreciprocal oral sex, so should the partner receiving automatically be much more attractive or higher in social status?
Yes. Right. They should be more. The person receiving only should be more attractive, right?
And that's a pretty radical political arrangement.
Matt, say something. Why is that radical, Matt? Matt's astounded at the discourse here.
No, I've been through this many times. I don't know if I have any specific additions. Right.
I have to apologize because I just want to understand. So,
no.
Someone attractive is getting the blowjob, and if they're attractive and the person giving it isn't attractive, is that the ought, right? That's how it should be, right? Am I like kind of like getting out of it too much?
Yeah, well, it's sort of an interesting thing from just total. It's a different scenario from like total social atomization, but I think what's interesting is that that scenario actually does happen between men with like women doing that to higher status men, but I think involving like an incel and a higher status female, then that's just unreal. I mean, that's unreal. It's more unrealistic. Like a pretty rare. Maybe it's happened, but I'd say it's pretty rare actually.
It is rare.
But the scenario where like I think like you even see this in movies sometimes, like an ugly nerdy woman, or who gives head to a Chad. Like that's actually kind of a theme in like even movies sometimes.
That's more realistic.
I think it's more realistic, okay. But the other scenario, like I mean, it's probably happened, but I don't think it's that common. But I think promoting it has potential to be like socially and politically radical.
I see what you're saying. So I understand that, Matt. Should we put it into Grug language? Changing the hierarchical nature of blowjobs could alter social.
Well, because I think it's a metaphor. I don't want to like make it too much just about sex. It is about sex, but it's a metaphor for social and class hierarchies and arrangements. So, because our society is very hierarchical, but it's also very atomized, and it's an interesting I don't know like how to say this without getting like too autistic, and I think we're getting close to like peak autism.
This is pretty.
We're
all pretty autistic.
Yeah, but it's like a metaphor for a new like class and social arrangement that's maybe it's not egalitarian, but it manages social arrangements and social hierarchies and class structures better. Like it's a metaphor for that.
Because the way I always viewed your oral sex fixation, Robert, is as a metaphor. Yes, it's not really about literally arranging for certain sexual practices to happen, but rather as a metaphor for the way social hierarchy works. And rather than the disguised hierarchies that we have around us and rich people pretending to be poor and poor people wanting so badly to be rich, the power of the oral sex or general sexual BDSM also type metaphors is that it evokes hierarchy in a way that is, at least in theory, pleasurable to all parties. And I think there's something of that. There's a noblesse oblige. Well, would you say there's a noblesse oblige to rich girls letting incels give them head?
Yeah, like it is, because the thing is like it is a noblesse oblige, like they're giving them access to something that they wouldn't have access to in a million years. But the other thing, I think the other angle is like those with status, they don't want to become explicitly like exploitative. So in a sense, like it's that angle, but then it's also like being more explicit and visual about like the exploitation in like a BDSM act.
In the sort of, to take a look at it from a sort of Crowleyan angle of sorts, Crowley and other esotericists would look at the meaning of the position of sex as a kind of yogic, formation. There's tantric. There's a famous section of the Book of Lies, chapter 69, about 69ing. I don't remember exactly what he says about it, but he, there's this notion that it's like this self-nourishing yin-yang formation. Anyway, there's something to that, to oral sex, whether it's mutual oral sex or just straightforward oral sex, where there's a harmony to the act, right? There's a give and a take. There's a production of pleasure and also a taking of essence that occurs. There's something sort of yogic about it, and I think I view your views on oral sex as sort of tapping into that more esoteric meaning to the significance of oral sex, and then applying that politically. I don't know if we need to totally deduce exactly all of it. I just think it's a powerful metaphor. Yeah.
And the other angle to it is there's an element of alchemy, or that like DNA contains a spiritual force. And I've been thinking like some of the early Gnostic sects would actually like consume semen as a spiritual ritual. It also makes me think of that, because like so DNA contains the spiritual essence, and you're consuming large quantities of other people's DNA, thus you're consuming their spiritual essence.
No, I think about that shit a lot. There's an element of vampirism to it too, and I say, all I can say is I think about this a lot. I mean, I don't know what the upshot is. I don't have a specific prescription for people other than that. semen matters. It's not like Monty Python, every sperm is precious necessarily, or that, it's just, it is the essence. I'm a believer in semen retention, etc. And oral sex too is rife with that meaning, and it is nothing short of religious and spiritual as well as biological.
Okay, so we are inferring that semen, cum, whatever, it has spiritual essence.
Yeah.
And maybe cunnilingus juices too.
Okay, so vaginal juices as well. So are we also implying that you could, in theory, rub your cum on like a sigil and it'll work?
I believe that.
Doesn't this theory also affirm that as well?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, who knows? Like I can't speak from experience.
I can. I can, but I won't. Continue.
Okay. So that's. I mean, I'm just accentuating the what that also means for people. So what?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you swallow someone's cum, what happens to you energetically? Like if a woman swallows it.
Like I think it could have some. The DNA, I'm not sure. Like it gets accused of a pseudoscience idea that like you permanently absorb another person's DNA. But I think there has to be some partial truth to that, even if it's just like as a metaphor.
Just as a metaphor.
Like if a white person performs a lot of fellatio on a black person, do they like adopt like black genes? Do they become like part black? Or if a woman performs a lot of fellatio on a man, does she adopt like a lot of male testosterone and become more masculine? Or does a man who performs a lot of cunnilingus, like does he absorb a lot of estrogen and become more feminine?
I think the specifics of that are probably pseudoscientific, but I think it does work as a metaphor. And what I'd say about oral sex specifically, and this is related to what you talk about, Robert, I've often said in a way that you found transfixing, oral cunnilingus or analingus is not most people who have it, they're not thinking about it in any kind of BDSM way, but there is this element of your highest part, your mouth, which is a very verbal. You can talk about it in terms of the chakras. It's a very verbal, personal part of you that you experience the world with, that you talk with. There's a logos element to it, and you're putting it in contact with a lower chakra. What is even the word for the lowest chakra? I don't know, but that's what's down there, right? Whether you're the root chakra, which is the least, the furthest thing from logos. So there's this inversion that does occur. There is something of yogic significance to that. No doubt, and in this way, it doesn't have to be BDSM, but it is a very specific act of bringing high with low, which is rife with magical potential. Again, Crowley, I haven't even read all that Crowley has said about this, but I think he had actually, in an unironic way, I think he would be very much interested in this conversation about oral sex and what it really means, and of course, in terms of swallowing semen or vaginal juices. Sorry?
The paper.
Oh.
Yeah.
In terms of actually swallowing semen, what is this? It is similar to the act of vaginal intercourse, which can produce pregnancy. Where two join and create a third, pregnancy. It is just a version of that involves a higher chakra, as it were, or on the map of the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. It's a higher up, more logos oriented thing, and it's a specific magical act. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but there's this swallowing of cum which doesn't do anything. It doesn't produce a third, but maybe it does, but it's only in the spiritual and metaphorical realm. I'm not the expert on the total upshot of all this, so much as to say that a lot of people have oral sex. A lot of people have oral sex with strangers. And I'm not judging anyone's lifestyle choices, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing because it's rife with all of this magical power. It happens all the time.
Here's a thought. So maybe in theory, if you swallow your own cum when you masturbate, which you shouldn't be masturbating.
Why not? Or you shouldn't be masturbating.
Maybe you just...
if you do, you're better off eating it.
Maybe you regain your energy back?
I think there's some truth to that. Also, I was going to say that in recent...
Thoughts on that, Robert?
Any thoughts on eating your own cum when you masturbate, Robert?
Well, you're absorbing your own energy back, but it's like I don't have a strong opinion or strong feelings, but sure you're taking back some of your energy that you're losing. It's like maybe it's like a new, like the semen retention that's become like if you want to call it a grift, but maybe maybe that's some kind of compromise of semen retention.
I think it is, and the other thing I was going to say, current events. I'm not a big fan of Megan Fox and Machine Gun Kelly or whatever. There was some. I only heard about this through my girlfriend, who was talking about it in a sort of tabloid way. But I guess they like drank each other's blood or something, and everyone was horrified by this. I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but what Megan Fox said in response was like, "Well, you suck a stranger's dick, you eat a stranger's cum," is what she said. Is like a lot of people do that. Like, why is this worse? And I kind of agree. It's like I'm not saying people should be vampires or drink each other's blood, but if you have some ritual reason for doing that with someone you actually know and love and trust, I mean, yeah, is that really worse than eating a stranger's cum? I'm inclined to say no, because these things, the difference between vampirism and eating cum may be less different than we'd like to think. Yeah, and obviously, Robert, a lot of this. You've written about this on Substack, but a lot of it is sort of articulated in the symbolism of the seats that appear in both the coffins / the seats that appear in both of your books. The sort of forced oral sex metaphorical scenario you have in both your novels, and we could talk about that more. But I would say people should just read your work to see how this stuff is explored.
Robert, in this conversation, is there anything you'd like to expound upon more regarding that politics, the politics of oral sex essay that we haven't maybe done justice to?
I don't really have a lot more to say, but I think a lot of these new arrangements, they seem unrealistic, but I would like to see like avant-garde art being promoted as a vehicle to promote it. And like at some point I'd like to see like a movie about this, and like really get it out into the culture.
About oral sex. Would it be a porno, or would it be an art film in a non-euphemistic sense? It would be
an art film, but it would be erotic.
It would be X-rated.
It might, and it could be R-rated, but it might have to be X-rated. But I just want to see this concept get pushed out into the culture, and not just something like fringe, like something that like people of social standing are like discussing. Like, even normies need to be discussing this, too. Like, it can't just be in the fringe. It has to be something like you would see, like, a mainstream, like, feminist publication, like, writing about.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I agree that there's a lot of interesting filmic potential in this.
It's also, I think one more thing to add, it's a way to kind of troll the gender wars.
Yes.
Because it's a way to... You were kind of fucking with feminism, but you're also kind of co-opting some of their dialectic at the same time, and even some of their grievances. Well, that angle's interesting too.
Yeah, it is. And we met with Susan Block, the sex doctor Susan Block, who not exactly. Well, she is a feminist. She's more interesting than most feminists, but that was an example of us doing it in real life, I guess.
Yeah,
I'll link to that in the description here. Because have you ever seen that, Evan?
I have.
Yeah, it's something else.
She actually had a show about. I can't believe, like, she had me like whip a guy in a Trump mask.
This happened 2018.
I voted for Trump in 2016, which made it even more weird.
Indeed. Should we go in?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about all this stuff.
We
can talk about normal things now.
We can talk about normal things now. All right, should we continue? Thanks. You guys want to... Yeah, this is cool. Right there.
I'll sit here.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Wherever you want to sit.
Yeah. Or actually, Thanks.
Thank you.
Into it, by all means. I'm just gonna go.
Here's an interesting question, Robert. Can you tell me what's wrong with Christianity?
Yeah, to start things off, I think like a flaw with Christianity is the moral authoritarianism, which influences a lot of like modern politics. A lot of problems with politics is that there's any lack of dualism, and this applies, I mean, beyond both to the left and right in politics, and like the lack of nuance, and how, like, without getting into too much detail like on policy, how an issue is instead about finding the right balance, like balance on an issue of like contracting, like you could say like a yin and a yang, like the contrast of two components to a political issue. Instead of finding balance, people think in like good versus bad binary, and that, I think that is an influence from Christianity. So theosophy as like an alternative must influence politics, including dualism. But yeah, theosophy needs to be like the foundation for politics. And the thing about like you take something like morality is you do it's not promoting like nihilism or total moral relativism. You have to kind of decide like what things are absolutes that you could say are influenced by either the divine or by nature. And then you have to figure out like how much morality is just, I don't know, kind of bullshit, or not necessarily bullshit, but just like a product of like socialization, and how much morality is situational. Like, does it serve a purpose in a specific circumstance?
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
In order to establish those ideals, do you think that would require, and this kind of segues into NRX, but more so like kind of like a prophet, so to speak, or like can the government legislate the values of those morals, or who do you think would do that, perhaps?
Well, I think like it's going to take like a spiritual, cultural, like kind of revolutionary movement, but I don't really have, I mean, as far as implementing it, I don't really have the answer for that. But I guess another example is like,
oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
I guess another example is like kind of like a radical center where you have like progressive solutions to a like right wing view of human nature. That could be an example of it. But I think the other issue is that Christianity lacks an answer to how people are spiritually different due to biology, and how like people being spiritually different due to biological factors affects questions of morality and questions of salvation. So think about like when Christians talk about salvation, a very specific personality type which is linked to biology affects whether someone is saved or not. So if you accept that premise, then either you go in two directions. Either you become like a Calvinist and you believe in predestiny, or you basically go in a theosophical direction. But there are major flaws. I mean, to show you like major flaws of like evangelical like Christianity. But I think some counterpoint I'll actually add is, even as like a theosophist, I do think that you could say like there is some historical legitimacy to Christianity, and there is a good chance that Jesus could have existed. It's just the question is like how much was changed or corrupted like later on. So I'm not even necessarily anti-Christian. Like there is a lot of value in the Christian mystics from like Swedenborg to Meister Eckhart and William James, or even the Neoplatonist influence on Christianity, like with the theologian Origen. And Origen was the theologian who he came up with the concept of the Trinity.
Really?
Maybe I don't know if he would say came up with it, but he
cemented it.
Cemented
it.
Yeah, exactly. And he was basically Neoplatonist. So Neoplatonism influenced Christianity. And I think like another thing is, but I do think like the appeal of Christianity is that it's a very simple religion, which I don't mean that as actually an insult. I think that's part of its appeal, but it is true that around the time of like
ethically, especially, it's a pretty simple religion. Yeah.
And there's a case for that. I'm not even mean that in a derogatory sense, but like when in the late Roman Empire, like Christianity appealed to the Roman proletariat, while Neoplatonism did to the patrician class. So maybe you could say like there's like the highest gods, and then there's like demons, but maybe like is there also like a god of the normies who deals with things like petty moralism?
So would Christianity be the petty moralism that you would follow? That
I
people-
wouldn't necessarily say that, but that could be. It's like the Gnostics have like the demiurge, and maybe like there's like. But that gets like really metaphorical.
You bring up an
speaking.
interesting topic that the Gnostics might think of the demiurge as like the god of the normies, as it were, because I think that is. It's both one of the things that's interesting about Gnosticism and one of its pitfalls, I think, is that it attracts people who like to think they are better than others.
I mean, not everybody can be an epic Freemason
Well, I would
occultist.
say- I
And
would
like
definitely-
some people, I believe in hierarchy, and I'm not really into egalitarianism, so I do believe some people are better than others, and therefore that's one of the appeals of Gnosticism. Is there may be a deeper level for some people. However, I also think if you're playing with fire, you're playing with fire when you tell people, oh, you understand something no one else does. It attracts the wrong type of people who maybe are legitimately more intelligent, get corrupted. These issues are not easy to resolve. So that's why I both like and dislike Gnosticism, I guess, at the same time.
And then in regards to occultism, since I kind of brought that up, do you think that shit's evil, or anything like that, or like
I mean,
the sex magic we were talking about?
Interpretation occultism, like there's white magic and dark magic. I think the main flaw with occultism is that it's just because there's all this gatekeeping and it is elitist, which obviously said elitism can be a good thing, spiritual elitism, but I feel it's kind of incoherent and there's a lack of practical ways to practice it. But I really like Colin Wilson's talk on consciousness and consciousness as like a practical mysticism or occultism, but like theurgy comes into this too. So theurgy even has an influence in like Catholicism, but using visual aesthetics to create a spiritual experience. That's what theurgy is. That's an example. So matter versus consciousness creates reality. So shifting consciousness, but also finding ways to alchemize matter. That's basically the essence of mysticism and the occult.
So would elites? So is it pretty much predetermined, predestined that elites will always be like epic occultists, like because it's an elitist thing to do?
I don't know. Like I feel a lot of the cultist stuff you get from the cultist stuff about occultic elites from conspiracy theorists is a lot of it is overblown, and
Yeah, I agree
it's
with
sort of
that.
used as a way. It comes back from like Christians using it to demonize like pagans.
I see. And kind of combining two questions together regarding the future of California and America. What type of religion is the future of America contingent on to survive, and how do you see that playing out? And what do you think of that? Like,
I really have no idea, but I do predict like a new religious revival, which seems to come along about every century. So you had like the 1840s with the Transcendentalists, the 1940s like the Pentecostals, and however you also had like the New Wave movement from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So like a resurgence in cults. We could also see some kind of like new Christian revival, because you see like traditional Christianity in decline. Like we do, I don't know. Like I could put forth like.
all good. Thank you.
Curry is thank you.
Oh, that looks really good.
Lamp Vindaloo?
That's me.
Okay.
Thank you with rice too.
Yeah,
Cool.
it does. I'll get it.
Thank
Okay. Can you hold it?
Got it.
Alright.
Thank you very much.
you.
Ooh, looks great.
haunted?
What's on?
It's just standing up on its own. I don't
Oh,
know why that's so
that's
impressive
me.
to me.
That's me. I did that.
Yeah, no doubt.
You read it.
Anyway, so I got some lamb vindaloo. Matt got some.
Vindaloo and curry.
I think mine has potatoes, and there's a few other different things. And then you got a curry. What did you get to eat?
The vegetarian tally.
Cool.
You're mostly vegetarian, right, Robert? You want to talk about that?
Mostly
for a second?
vegetarian, but not entirely. But
Is that like a stomach thing, or is that for your spiritual wellness?
Naan butter.
Ah, thank you. We have some garlic naan.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Rice, welcome, and one for you.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
All right, so going back to that,
yeah, so
so what does
Can I just say this is the perfect food for a slightly cold day.
the thing
Indeed.
is, like Matt and I were gonna start a new religion, and never really took off. But it was like a spark that led to this journey. But anyhow, like I do predict
So
like
you would give me credit as sparking your interest in some of this stuff?
well,
Robert?
yeah, somewhat, but yeah, like I do predict
Can
like
you say that as a soundbite that you get? I'm just kidding.
None for the colleague, and here is vegetarian.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have a
Okay.
spicy sauce for the naan?
The hot sauce?
The hot sauce.
Okay.
I feel like we should eat, and then we'll continue
Okay,
on
we'll
this.
continue.
Yeah, you can keep recording if you want, but why not? I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so we just finished eating. We're gonna continue on the problems, or no, I'm sorry, the future of America's civil religion, what that would be like. It's kind of like a Christian revival. Oh yeah, the rise of cults. You kind of mentioned, right, Robert?
Yeah. I see like I see new religions and cults forming, and it could also be a Christian revival. So I don't know like what it will look like. It's interesting because the alternative history prediction YouTuber What If Altus, he predicts like California and the West Coast will have a new religion that will be like new agey, but like will take like wokeness and put it into like a future religion. He actually predicted that in one of his videos, which is interesting. But like I used to see like a lot of new Christian sects forming. Or because right now Christianity is on a decline, and the country is becoming more secular. But it's like people say like wokeness is a religion, and it kind of is. But like MAGA is a cult. You could say like Trump is a deity to many, even if those people would like call themselves. He's an avatar, yeah.
Steve Bannon describes him as a man in time. So that's under the supposition of Devi's inference that Hitler was a man out of time. I think that was man against time or something like that. But so this will segue into what we're still talking about. This preemptive question: would you describe yourself as a Californian enclavist?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, so with that in mind, what would a specifically Californian civic religion look like? Would it incorporate the bear at all that's on the flag or anything like that?
I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'd like to see like a California version of theosophy that is like maybe tailored to enclavism. I'd like to see that, but But who knows if it's? Not saying that I think that will happen, but that's what I'd like to see.
Perhaps like the surfer bro dialects, kind of like that smoke weed,
Right.
cool chill guy thing. Is that going to be, you think, maybe a part of how people will act in a California enclave?
Could be.
Okay, and on the topic of California,
That's a major subculture. So like enclavism includes it could be ethnic, but it could include like the many different subcultures in California.
yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah, and a lot of people have like multiple identities, so that might get kind of a little chaotic.
Have you seen the film Boys in the Hood?
I think a long time ago.
Wow, that's a really good one. Well,
John Singleton, right?
yeah, I
I want to
believe
watch
so.
more John Singleton films. I've heard there's also one where Michael Rappaport becomes like a white nationalist. I want to watch that one.
Oh, wow.
I don't think I've seen it. Maybe I've seen clips of it.
The reason why I bring it up is because I suppose that's part of kind of the black subculture of not necessarily being a gangster criminal, but just kind of that, that style of hip hop, like Kendrick Lamar. That'd be like the black subculture in a California enclavist society, and then there's the whites, and they have like the surfer thing kind of going on, and then there's the woods people, and I guess they're kind of more like Oregonians kind of vibe.
We'll meet Part of today has been Robert may come on this adventure to Lassen Volcanic National Park.
Well, I'll go to the state of Jefferson territory for the first time in my life.
People are, yeah. We're the quote unquote state of Jefferson. So Robert will expand his journeying in California, which is important because he's one of our greatest California scholars.
That's very true. And on that,
I've been to the Bay Area many times. I've been to Sacramento, but I've never been to like the really far north part of California before.
what do you think of Gavin Newsom?
I think he's terrible, but I don't even think he's terrible. But like the question is like how effective he is as like being a technocrat, and like some people say like he's perfect for sort of like this managed decline. But I also get a feeling that he's sort of like the Democrats' Ron DeSantis, where he was like overhyped for the next president, but he ended up being a failure as a candidate. So, but I do think, like, I think he's terrible, but I do think he's important.
Terrible, but not entirely incompetent. Would you say?
Not entirely. I think he's important as like an archetype, as like a technocrat who's overseeing like a managed decline. And maybe if that's his purpose, then I can't say he's bad at what he's doing. If that's his purpose.
Yeah, he seems kind of like Trudeau as well, like just like a
He does remind me of Trudeau. Like
Higher T than Trudeau, but yes.
yeah, for sure.
So Gavin Newsom, why would he want why is California declining?
A lot of different factors, but the thing is, it's kind of a slow decline. I do think I get like these right wing media figures who they overhype it and they exaggerate it, and they're all like for clickbaits, and it's like where we are now, like our day today, we had a pretty nice day, and I don't think we're it feel like walking around right now, like downtown Santa Barbara, definitely necessarily feels like in some big. It doesn't really meet the image of like how it's portrayed. Like where these right wing media channels will like handpick like Skid Row in downtown, or the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and these homeless encampments just to prove how everything's like. I mean, California is a great place to live if you can afford it, and it has many problems. But I would say it's in decline. But it feels more this kind of stagnant, slow decline, rather than the image that the right wing media. But it's not. It's far from having like any kind of like renaissance or rebirth. But it's more like it's very atomized, and it's kind of deracinated as having the role of like a colony of a colony. But I do think California is very significant. Has a significance like to spirituality, including New Age spirituality, but also like religious sects and cults, including like Christian sects, like with the Michael Marinacci book, California Jesus.
California Jesus.
Oh yeah, I know of it too. But
You read it or?
I've read parts of it. Michael Marinacci is someone Robert and I interviewed. He spoke at PRS last year. He was a contributor to Weird California, part of the Weird series, like Weird New Jersey. Right. He did Weird California. He was one of the writers, and he wrote a book called California Jesus about Christian sects that started in California, of which there are many, of varying quality. Some are just simply a little weird. Some are downright cultish, occult-oriented. Children of God being the worst example. We were reading it because we were, at the time, researching Mel Gibson's father for that documentary I say about.
I want to say, I don't want to get too much into the drama, but I have no clue what's happening with that. I have no clue what happened with that Mel Gibson documentary.
Yeah, I guess we should say that because some people might listen and ask. So I guess it's on hiatus, shall we say? But Michael Marinacci's book, California Jesus, covers the Mel Gibson funded a Sedative Conscious Latin Mass church in Malibu, which is by invite only. It's very exclusive. But that's why we were reading it. Anyway, Marinacci is an interesting figure. I don't want to derail the conversation. I don't remember where we were. But one last question. So we're integrating this now into the podcast. Literally, the idea came just today of Robert, you joining this trip that I'm going to be doing to Northern California. I'm going to be seeing Lassen Volcanic National Park, as mentioned, Sacramento, Redwoods. We're also going to stop through San Francisco. And San Francisco has been getting a bad rep. It's been getting a lot of press for having high crime, which as you were saying, maybe it's a little bit selective, but it does seem like San Francisco is a good deal worse than LA. When was the last time you were in San Francisco, and are you going to be kind of curious to see? We're going to be staying near Union Square, which is specifically a part that was said to get worse. So, what are your thoughts on that, or what are you expecting to see? What are you hoping to see?
I think the last time I went to San Francisco, I forget. I think it was with you.
Yeah,
2021.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't as bad. I mean, it seems like there was a lot less foot traffic, as I remember it, prior to the pandemic. But it wasn't as bad as the media is a lot of the media makes it out to be.
Right. So I guess we'll see if the more recent reporting on that is more of this. I mean, there's undeniably bad things that have happened. I guess what did they close? Some of those famous department stores in Union Square, and we're staying basically in Union Square, so we will see.
They closed the big mall, the San Francisco shopping center.
Right. So that was last year. Maybe it's on. I've also heard it's back on the upswing. I don't know. I haven't been in 2 years now too. So we shall see. But it was basically, this is getting into the nuts and bolts, and we can move on to the next question. Is the reason Union Square got hit, you think, because it's next to Tenderloin, and basically the badness of the Tenderloin started to spread? Is that your impression on that?
I think our hotel we're staying is kind of in the border of Union Square and the Tenderloin, but that was a big part of it. But it was also like remote work. There was also like a lot of office vacancies because Union Square also appealed. There's issues with like the homelessness in the Tenderloin, but also Union Square also appealed a lot to office workers from the financial district who, with remote work, were no longer there.
I see.
Just a quick segue. I want to talk about who breeds in California. So it's pretty clear there's a white decline, and I recalled one of your essays you talked about or someone else's essay, I don't remember exactly.
Can we skip this because I don't have the data on me?
Well,
Or just
all I wanted to say was white civil rights laws. What do you think about that?
I think like I don't think it's viable under the like one party democratic rule, but I think California would be better off under something like the Swiss canton model, or maybe like Singapore's version of multiculturalism, where it's, I guess you could say it's like a neutral or symmetrical like multiculturalism, where every group is just treated as like balanced, having their own interests and legitimate, but there isn't this like without the kind of whole like majoritarian versus minority oppressor dialectic.
I see. And kind of moving on, still talking about California, I want to talk about a lot of sympathizers, or people who sympathize with the concept of NRX, the neo-reactionary movement in America. What do you think about that, as well as do you think that could, employing that, maybe a more powerful Newsom character could fix California? Maybe we'll talk about NRX first.
Yeah, like NRX. Yeah, as a philosophy, and they have. I mean, there's many different figures. Like they do have a lot of legitimate criticisms of liberal democracy, but I mean, I think they're great in their assessment and critique of the problems, but they come short at offering solutions. And like with Yarvin, he seems to want like tech CEOs to become like monarchs, which I think is a terrible idea.
Why is that a terrible idea?
Because obviously they're people motivated very much by like. I don't think that capitalism leads to the best elites.
Oh, so a better elites would be like a more aristocratically feudal type of birthing, kind of.
I mean, there's problems with hereditary monarchs as well, but some kind of like the question is, I think you want people who are on the highest level, like intellectually, creativity, as far as creativity and spirituality. But I think it's harder, like coming out as like how do you actually select for that? How do you implement? That's much trickier. And there's like ideal, like Plato's ideal of like the guardian caste. But I would favor like some kind of city-state models with. They could be democracies on a small scale, but they could also like restrict democracy. I think like one of my most radical ideas is like testing people's like brainwaves for spiritual traits, like how strong their brainwaves are in a reaction to something. It could be like just beauty or nature, as simple as that. And then selecting for like an elite kind of caste based on those traits. But yeah, it does almost sound a bit like I'm not necessarily pro Scientology. It sounds a bit like Scientology, but I mean it's probably unrealistic. But that's probably like one of my most radical or controversial views.
I thought more of like Dune, but anyway, so these people would be in like a Politburo of like aristocrats.
Select. Probably, I think the best way to select for like an aristocracy is like testing like brainwaves for how strong of a spiritual reaction people have.
That's pretty cool. And talking about NRX again. Are there any other thinkers that you're aware of, like Yarvin?
But like going back, H.P. Lovecraft advocated he was like I think it was like called he ended up being like a New Deal supporter, and he started off on the right, but he advocated like aristocratic socialism, with like as like the most intellectual people as like the aristocracy.
I see, and I recall in one of your interviews you talked about that there needs to be some sort of harmony between the castes of like warriors and shopkeepers and stuff.
I guess like Plato talked about like proportional inequality, or kind of a tripartite system. So like capitalism is ruled by like the merchants, but there has to be like some kind of balance, because I think the problem like fascism is rule of the warrior caste, and that's kind of fits in with what BAP idealizes that, but that obviously didn't work out. Communism is an attempt of like dictatorship of the proletariat. That didn't work out. Capitalism's rule of the merchant. That's been a big failure. So I think the ideal is some kind of like proportional inequality where you balance these different like archetypes.
I think so too. I mean, that just clearly just makes the most sense. I'm not sure about you, Strange Flows listener. We're gonna pass over the mic to Matt now. You got any thoughts, Matt?
Sorry, what was just said? What was just said a moment ago?
An ideal society would be a syncretic division of warriors, shopkeepers, the proletariat class, all kind of having like a say in society, instead of capitalism being the rule of the merchant class or fascism being the rule of the warrior class.
No, I think there's some truth to that. I think, and I know you were talking about Yarvin and such, and I think some of the monarchists would say that monarchy could best facilitate that on some level. I mean, there is something in the medieval society where you had the priests, the warriors, and the merchants, right, and as well as peasants. And the only thing I'd really say about that, without co-signing on any particular ideology, is that I am reminded of tarot. You know, people often will say that swords, cups, pentacles, and wands all correspond to different social classes. Swords being warriors. Pentacles being merchants, cups being priests. What's the one I'm missing? Wands.
Cups, swords,
wands being peasants, usually, actually. It doesn't map perfectly onto most people's understanding of tarot, but as with tarot, I mean, I think there's a notion of harmony that can come out of these four things interacting. So on an esoteric level, I think, I agree, and I think this extends to other areas of life besides politics.
I just had an interesting question for Robert. Regarding what a monarch would look like in the future, I'm reminded of the physiognomy of Baron Trump, and I also think of BAP. And would a future monarch just be like a really buff-looking Caesar who is really smart?
Could be.
Could be.
But that doesn't. That doesn't guarantee greatness as a leader either. I think the problem, but I guess if you go about it with BAP, as a lot of things, I'm really fascinated with BAP. I enjoy listening to his podcasts, but I think he places a strong sense on like the warrior as like the ideal ruler, and that was kind of, I mean, he gets accused of being like a fascist, but actually like fascism was rule of the warrior caste, and I think fascism, like you can have like a nuanced take on it, but I still think it was overall a negative thing.
Was Mussolini really like a warrior though? I mean, he seemed like kind of just big guy, didn't really fight.
No.
It is true that, and I'm not the expert on fascism or history, but it is true that almost all the fascist leaders, Hitler, Mussolini, and even Franco, who I know less about than the other two, to be honest, but and perhaps even Juan Perón, who's not a fascist per se, but who's a little bit of that ilk. They all were military figures. There is this sense, even though they themselves were not warriors.
Yeah,
there was
not who they were. I mean, like
their role as commander-in-chief in general was part and parcel of their leadership. So maybe that, and military might was huge.
It's interesting because like someone like Ezra Pound, who was like the archetype of like the struggling failed artist, he ended up supporting Mussolini, and he had this like his political kind of this esoteric fascism where he believed like the artist should be like the ruling class. Yeah. You have figures like Wyndham Lewis, H.P. Lovecraft, who
who were like art fascists who thought
David Bowie for a short time was
David
fascist.
Bowie for a short time, and the person who brings if you're setting out a dichotomy between the art fascist and the warrior fascist, Ernst Jünger is the man, and then these two things come together. Not even to suck his dick, but just like you can see where the connection could be drawn. Or art is war by other means, etc., etc.
What about Oscar Wilde?
Well, what about him? I mean, he was an aristocratic elite. Listen, these variations break down. I was actually going to add a point that, not that anyone needs debunking as to whether or not Donald Trump is a fascist, but the best way to really push against that point is that there's really nothing. There's very little in him of the warrior, or even of the particularly involved general. Obviously, the president of the United States is technically in charge of the military, but Trump doesn't really have that warlike flavor, and in fact has been an anti-war candidate. So you could really, I think, of the many arguments you could make against Trump being a fascist per se, or the abuse of that word when applied to him, I think that's the best one, is that he's not militant. But to your point with Oscar Wilde, it's like, yeah, he is a certain kind of aristocratic radical. Trump is too, in a very Americanized way. So there's a difference between just being aristocratic and being a fascist. But the borderlines are going to get gray, but by most just to finish the point, by most meaningful definitions of fascism, I do think you really need that military angle. I think that defines it much better if it's going to be a meaningful historical category.
It's interesting, like you take Hitler, like his background was as an artist, but he's still true. So like, but he chose to this focus point of the politics was like he had a strong emphasis on like the arts. And there was like Wagner, but there's still like the strong focus was still on militarism. Right. That's what defined National Socialism.
He came to praise. Not that I'm an expert on this, but even with Wagner, it's like for national greatness. It's like military music, and I don't know exactly what painting he was praising in the end, but it was kind of subsumed by the nationalism and the militarism, which most people, even from a right-wing perspective, would say is a kind of compromise of the fundamental attitude there.
And a quick note, if we recall that that discourse about Hitler's art, just to quickly talk about it. Just looking at the type of art it was just kind of, it was a formalist, formalist landscapes, and there was a lot of discourse regarding, well, he was really bad at, spacing or whatever, but that just goes to show the type of art that Hitler was into, that he liked.
Yeah, you have people. It's like this goes back to like the moral authoritarianism that has an influence from like Abrahamic faiths. Like it's like because he did really horrific, evil things, you can't find like you have to say like his art was evil too. It's this kind of weird like moral authoritarianism. Like I don't think he wasn't like Van Gogh. But his art wasn't terrible either.
Something to note that you said earlier, Matt, was that art is war.
Who coined that? Art is war by other means.
The quote is "Politics is war by other means," and I'm just literally copy pasting it. But you could make an argument that art is a man who is denied a chance to fight with tooth and nail and beak and claw, instead finds aesthetic creation as another means of asserting himself. It's pretty loose. Politics is war by other means in a more direct sense than art is. But I think you could say that a lot about what Uncle Ted would have called surrogate activities, that they are the channeling of some kind of seminal sort of instinct that could otherwise have been stirred about. For most artists, they're not warlike people, but you have examples like Jünger who are both, and even Ernest Hemingway on a more leftward side, I guess, who are have that instinct to battle and greatness, but also put it into art.
Exactly regarding putting it into art. Maybe in the future, this monarch will be an epic memer, and he's just really good at mimetic philosophy, and he creates great memes that are very prolific, even about himself, as we saw with Trump's election, campaign in 2016. Like, the memes flowed.
Yeah.
And on that note, please listen to Robert's podcasts, please read his Substack, subscribe to his buy his books. They're really good, and he's very smart and a great artist. And everybody's sleeping on him, and you really should just listen to what Robert has to say about everything regarding California politics, American domestic politics. You don't really do that much foreign policy or
a little bit.
foreign
Geopolitics, a little bit.
a little bit. Am I missing anything else that you do, Robert?
What's your
Substack?
robertstark.substack.com.
Right, and the books are Journey to Vapor Island and Vapor Fornia. Right now, the best way to get them is to just Google those things, and you'll find them on Lulu.
Yeah, Lulu.
One day they'll be on Amazon, and hopefully more people will read them because they're great. But follow Robert Starkian. If you don't have the digits in front of you, that's fine. He's readily findable on Twitter.
Is there anything you want to leave the audience with, Robert?
I think we covered a lot of stuff. I don't have anything else more to add. So check to it. I just want to say it was great speaking with both of you, Matt and Evan, and yeah, it was a really great interview. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. It's a real honor. This has been Strange Flows. We'll catch you later.
Change it and say